Welcome, I'm Eric with Vast Strength. In this video, I'm going to be discussing 5 pieces of home gym equipment that I think are underappreciated. What do I think makes them underappreciated? It's subjective, and I simply think that these things are either not promoted much or not discussed much, or maybe underutilized in the home gym community. The 5 things I'm going to discuss about aren't necessarily all similar. Some things are more of a specific item that one could purchase. Some of them are more of a category of things, and one of them maybe doesn't really fit at all. But it's my list, and I'm going to do what I want. So let's get to it and discuss some things that I think need more love. The first thing I'd like to discuss is not only a category, but also a specific item. In general terms, I think as home gym owners, we tend to underutilize the space on our walls. And I think we also tend to undervalue the strength of our studs as a source of attachments for equipment. Now, obviously for storage, we can store things such as barbells, weight plates, attachments for a rack, and that's all pretty obvious. But there's also a big value and a big role for things such as landmine attachments, seal row pad attachments, dip stations, pull-up stations, a number of different things that can be attached to the walls, to the studs, that I think could be space saving for the home gym and essentially allow you to really maximize and efficiently use your space. The specific item in this category I wanted to discuss further though is this monster strip. This is made by Rogue, although there are other companies such as PRX that make a similar product. If there are other products you're aware of that are similar to this, please let me know down in the comments. Now specifically what this is a piece of upright or cross member that is their typical 3x3 inch size. Now this is the Monster Series one, which has their 1 inch and 5/8 inch holes in a keyhole pattern. There is also, I believe, what they call the Monster Strip, or excuse me, they call the Rogue Strip 2.0, which has just the 5/8 inch holes if you prefer that. This comes typically in 2 sizes, I believe 16 inch and 36 inches, which are held directly to a stud vertically with either 2 or 4 screws respectively. Now what you're seeing here is actually 2 36 inch monster strips that are held or essentially attached in series on a single stud. And the reason I did this is so that I can actually vary the position, for instance, of the landmines that I use, and I can put them low, I can put them mid, I can put them high if I want. I enjoy doing a lot of landmine work, and having a strip set up like this just makes that a little bit easier. But obviously you can see the value in storage. You can do things such as attach leg rollers, plate horns, handles. I have down here spotter arm, and again you can see the attachment with the Clever built landmine here and a homegrown fitness landmine here at the bottom. Now I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a bit, but basically, long story short, I think these strips are very valuable for storage and also decreasing the friction it takes to be able to go do a lift. You're not going to have to worry about setting up your infinity arm for doing a bent over row or your dip attachment for doing dips, because it's already up, it's already ready, and so there's no difficulty in getting right to the lift. As a small caveat, I do want to mention I did make a small modification, which feel free to use, but use at your own risk, and that I added a piece of 1x3 wood that goes between the monster strip and the wall. I did this because otherwise I can't get a lot of attachments on there, such as the leg rollers or some of the attachments such as the Clever built landmine, or some of the J-cups will actually cause some damage to the walls, which you probably can't see in the video, but basically it's just not enough clearance space. I wish that Rogue would have addressed that when they made these, but que sera sera, they didn't, so I did make that modification. Again, please use at your own risk. The second piece of home gym equipment I want to discuss that I think is underappreciated by the home gym community is the landmine. The landmine is a device that allows you to put a barbell and attach it, for instance, to a power rack, or to quote unquote put it in the corner, or attach it to a stack of weight plates. And that leads directly to why I think to some degree that landmines are underutilized, underappreciated. When I ask friends that who possibly have lifted all their lives, whether a commercial gym or home gym, or been involved in sports, and I ask them, well, do you do any landmine lifts? One of the answers I commonly get is, oh, I don't know what that is. And then I say, oh, have you ever done the one where you have the bar in a corner? Like, oh yeah, you mean where you have the tennis ball at the end of the barbell, and then you put it in the corner? Yeah, I've done that. I'm like, what kind of lifts have you done with it? And they say, well, I did like some rows and I did some presses. Anything else? No, is it. Which it's not bad, and there's nothing wrong with it if that's what you're using it for. But what I'm getting at is I think for most people, it is not something that we're kind of maximizing its use. And I would argue that landmines are amazing in regards to having a versatility. There you go, versatile versatility. I don't know if that's a thing, but it's a thing now. This is gonna be a little bit ironic because later on in this video, I'm gonna probably go on a little bit of a rant about versatility, but this is a little bit different than what I'm gonna talk about later. For one, in regards to them having a versatile versatility, is that they're not just versatile in one manner. So for instance, you can do lots of lifts with it. So that's obviously versatile. But those lifts are often very high quality. Bent over row is a great lift. A seal mine row using a landmine using a landmine attachment is a great lift. Viking presses are great lifts. Landmine hack squats, landmine zerker squats. There's meadow rows, all kinds of things. Not to mention, which a lot of times I don't think of as much because I don't do as much probably core work as I should, but there's a ton of core exercises that can be done. So basically what I'm saying is that not only can you do a lot of specific lifts with a landmine, but a lot of those lifts are very high quality in regards to the gains and benefit you can get from them. But it's more than that. When you're looking at people who are doing lifts and you're talking about, for instance, somebody who's a novice versus somebody who's maybe a little bit more experienced, again, I think a landmine can have benefit for both those groups of people in different ways. For example, if you told me right now and you said, hey, I want you to teach somebody how to do a squat, which, by the way, I probably shouldn't teach anybody how to do a squat. I probably need to be taught how to do a squat. But let's say you took somebody who'd never ever done a squat. If I told them how to do a barbell squat with it on your back, on your shoulders, and I explained to them how to do that, it would be a very foreign concept, and it likely would be something that would be very challenging and uncomfortable and awkward for them to do. Whereas if I had somebody who was a novice lifter and I instructed them and told them how to do, for instance, a anterior squat holding the end of the landmine barbell, essentially similar to what a goblet squat would be with a dumbbell, if I had them do an anterior squat using a landmine, that's something they would actually probably do pretty well. And I think you would be surprised, or maybe I would be surprised, but I think that their form wouldn't look as bad as what you might expect. Why is that? Well, because I think that putting a barbell on your back, it's great. It's a wonderful exercise. But it's not real natural. You know, we don't do a whole lot of things like that during our day-to-day activities. Whereas if you handed somebody a bag of sand or a bag of groceries and you said, okay, here, pick this up, they're gonna pick it up, up around their chest, they're gonna have it close to their body, and they're gonna be lifting it that way, which is somewhat the way a front or anterior landmine squat would be. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, with a very experienced lifter, you can start doing lots of kind of more complex lifts, and with those complex lifts you can start to play around with the way you're doing them and the way where you're placing the bar, how you're using your attachment and where you're placing the attachment, so that you can somewhat tinker with the resistance curve and the strength curve. So I think there's a lot to offer that more experienced lifter as well. Storage wise, again, we're talking about versatility. Storage wise, the landmines can serve as a reasonably cheap but functional alternative to, for instance, a single barbell holder. There are plenty of ways to obviously store your barbells in your gym, and I'm not saying this is the best one. I'm just saying if we're going to compare, for instance, the price of maybe a single barbell holder versus a landmine, the price probably is not as different as you might expect. I actually went to the Rogue website earlier today, and if I, for instance, was going to pick up a vertical or horizontal single barbell monster rack barbell holder, it'd run me around $70 to $80. But I could pick up a landmine, one of the Rogue landmines, for around $100. So for an extra $20, I could have a lot more function and versatility. keep in mind, yeah, you can spend a lot more. I also have the Cleva Landmine, which is fantastic, and I think typically runs around $100 to $150, but that's probably the high end of the spectrum for it. So yeah, for $100, $150, you're getting something though that's pretty quality and you can do a lot with. And you don't even have to spend that money and get still something that's quite functional. I also have a Landmine attachment by Homegrown Lifting, which I believe is more of a white label product that they sell. But I'm happy with that Landmine. I think it's about $40 to $50. And so it's one of those things that, yeah, I probably couldn't have picked up a single barbell holder for much less, if not much more than that. So I'm getting something that's providing a storage option to get the barbell up off the ground and has the functionality that obviously any Landmine has. And with the fact that I'm storing it in that manner, it allows me to essentially get to the lifts with less friction than I otherwise would have. I think for a lot of folks, when we think about doing Landmine work, the idea of like, oh, I'm gonna have to go get the Landmine and attach it, and then I'm gonna have to get, oh, it's just a lot of hassle, I don't wanna do it. But for me, again, if I'm doing even a complex lift with the Landmine, I don't anticipate or expect that setup to take more than 3 minutes, probably max, assuming that I've done it before and I know how I'm gonna set it up. With the fact that I just constantly have my Landmine bars just essentially ready to spring in action, it just provides less friction for doing the lifts that I want to do. And I think a lot of us in the home gym, we benefit from having less friction. So whatever we're doing, if we can do it quicker, do it easier, we're more likely to do it. I think Landmines are a great value. I think they add excellent versatility to your gym. And at least for me, some of my favorite exercises that I do in my gym are Landmine lifts. So hopefully more people can come to love it like I do. The first item we discussed was both a category and a very specific item in that category. The second thing we discussed was more of a generalized category of landmines. And then the third thing we're going to discuss right here is the Fig Jammer. Now, what's the Fig Jammer? The Fig Jammer is a landmine attachment that you see here. It's specifically this 3x3 piece of tubular metal that has 1-inch holes on all 4 sides in an offset pattern. And as you can see here, it allows you to attach items to this piece of metal. So for instance, you see the Rogue Dip Mutant Metal handles here that are attached to it. You have the Rogue leg rollers that are attached to it. But what this is the brainchild of a gentleman by the name of Chip Bertie, who goes by, I believe, Fig Jam Reviewer on YouTube. And he was the one that came up with this idea. And then Dean with Black Widow Training Gear was the individual that helped to make the dream and the genius a reality. So this was purchased from Black Widow Training Gear. I'm not aware of anything else that is exactly the same as this in both form and function. I do know that JD Gym Equip sells something that's somewhat similar that can be used for instance, Viking presses. And the reason I find it's different is I believe that one does not have 1-inch holes on all 4 sides. It only has the 1-inch holes essentially for the horizontal orientation you have here, and not essentially the vertical orientation that you would get here. So, why do I think this is underappreciated? Well, do you have a landmine? Do you own this? If the answer is no, then it's underappreciated. I really think that pretty much anybody who likes landmine work or who enjoys doing landmine exercises should really consider getting a Fig Jammer. Now, by the way, I have absolutely no type of financial benefit in saying that. I just love this piece of equipment that much. It's probably one of my favorite pieces of equipment or gear in my home gym. Why do I like it so much? I just enjoy the things that I'm able to do with it. Some of the lifts I love to do with this are, for instance, a landmine hack squat or a Zerker front squat or a Viking press, and a number of other lifts that I find are made to be very easy and very convenient with the Fig Jammer. Now, the one downside on this is in order to really get the maximum benefit of the Fig Jammer, you do have to have other equipment and other attachments to attach to it, such as the handles I discussed, or the leg rollers. So maybe it's an overstatement to say that everybody who has A Landmine should have this attachment, but I really think that if you're really wanting to maximize the use of your Landmine, that you should strongly consider getting yourself a fig jammer. Or if something else similar exists out in the community, you can consider that as well. But again, right now, I think this is the one and only. The fourth thing I want to discuss that I think is underappreciated in the home gym is the lowly, both figuratively and literally, ankle cuff. So ankle cuffs are generally used around the ankles and with the strap, and then the cable is then attached to the ring points here. But they can also be used on the wrist, and they can also be attached via a strap. And this specifically is kind of like a hammock strap, although some type of daisy chain type strap, and then that can be attached to a carabiner, and then the carabiner can be attached to the cable. And in fact, if you're using, for instance, a lat tower, you may attach two of these to a single cable, or in this case, you can also, if you're using a functional trainer, you could detach them and use them each separately. There are some content creators who have tried to popularize the use of ankle cuffs, and I'm sure there's many other people who've done so over the years. The ones that come to mind that I've watched are creators like Jeff Nippard or Joe Gray of Gray Matter Lifting, and they really discuss the kind of the value and benefits of using, for instance, the ankle cuffs on your wrists for doing a number of different cable exercises. So it's something that's already out there. I think people already do it. Why do I think it might be underrated? I guess it's just that I feel like I see it all the time, or at least maybe it just triggers me that I see people doing these exercises, for instance, face pulls, and they have the hold of their strap or whatever they're using, and they've got their wrists really flexed, and they've got their arms pronated, and then they're trying to do the exercise that way. And for instance, if you're trying to do face pulls, nothing wrong if you like doing it that way. I'm not meaning to disparage what you're doing. It's just that when I watch that, to me, it just screams out painful wrists, painful elbows, and actually I think does a less efficient job of actually working the muscle, for instance, in that case, maybe your posterior deltoid, than what it would if you just use, for instance, an ankle cuff. So to me, things like deltoid raises, whether anterior or lateral, or the face pulls, are really the best examples where I think using an ankle cuff is honestly just somewhat superior to a lot of other options. But obviously your mileage may vary. But if you have an ankle cuff and you haven't tried it for those exercises, and you do those exercises in your routines, give it a try. I think you might end up loving it as much as I do. The fifth and final thing that I wish to discuss is something that might be a little bit of a cheat on this list because it's not really a specific item or category or thing, and it's gonna vary for a lot of different people. But it was the second thing that actually came to my mind when I thought about this underappreciated list, so I decided I'd go ahead and include it, and admittedly, it's probably gonna be a little bit of a rant. There are gonna be some issues I'm gonna discuss that are maybe a little bit of a soapbox type issue for me. And so, if you bear with me, we'll discuss it and maybe you'll find some value from it. Maybe not. What I'm specifically wanting to address though is I think that the home gym community has a tendency to underappreciate and undervalue large pieces of equipment that may only do one or two things very, very well. What do I mean by that? I think something we commonly hear in the home gym community, and this is not driven, I think, necessarily by content creators, but is driven by consumers of both the content and also consumers of the products, who we are often, I think, bending a knee and praying to the altar of versatility. Don't get me wrong. Commonly we say versatility is king, and I love versatility. You've probably heard things in this actual video in which I've, spoke highly of things that have flexibility and versatility. I don't have a problem with that. I think versatility in a home gym is actually very important. I just think that maybe we tend to underrate the fact that not everything has to be versatile. And let me again kind of expand on this. If you're like me and you grew up in the time where they used to have these infomercials and you'd be up at 3 in the morning and it'd be some, infomercial where they'd be talking about some mop or some, goofy thing that had all these different functions. And let's say, for instance, as an example, that there's a breakfast maker, and this breakfast maker, oh man, it can do everything. It can fry an egg, it can cook your bacon, it can brew your coffee, it can toast your bread. All those things in one small, compact design. It can do all those things. So versatility and compactness, it's amazing, wonderful. Except, you know, you order it and then it arrives and then you realize, well, it's not very easy to clean the fryer and, you know, it kind of burns the toast and the bacon's really not that crisp and honestly the coffee it brews kind of sucks. And you go like, well, it does all these things, which is great. It just doesn't really do any of them very well. And ultimately you're like, yeah, maybe my toaster and my coffee maker take up more room on my counter, but they do a really good job of making toast and coffee. So I think sometimes we overvalue the versatility and undervalue the efficiency or how effective something is in doing what you're expecting it or wanting it to do. Another example, again, we constantly are talking about things with, you know, the king of versatility. But, and again, this isn't a dig on anybody if in regards to a product or people. It's just that, for instance, I don't need my open trap bar. I don't need to be able to do bench press with it. I don't need it to be able to do camber squats with it. Nothing wrong with doing that, and I do like some versatility. It's nice that I can rack it and I can do shrugs if I want, but mainly I just want to use it for deadlifts. Or for instance, maybe there's a multi-grip camber bar, and one of the features is it can be used as a cable attachment, but it's a 40-pound cable attachment. And do I really need to have a 40-pound camber bar cable attachment? Maybe you do, and there's nothing wrong with that. And again, that's where I know a lot of folks say, hey, but I want to have that versatility. I want to be able to use it, or at least be able to use it for that. But then one of the things I always come back to is, but are you using it for that? Is it something that you're actually going to do? Is it something that if you are going to do it, is it the best way to do it? Is it a worthwhile way to do it? But again, I'm not meaning to disparage versatility. Again, people say in the home gym, versatility is king. Let me use a little bit different analogy, still playing with the analogy of versatility is king. I think of, in regards to chess, that versatility is maybe queen. And if you've ever played chess, you know the queen is the most powerful piece on the board, and it's not even close. So the queen is superior to every piece on the board. The versatility of that piece is unmatched, and it can kind of really do not anything you want to do, but it's by far the most flexible piece. So you might say, then obviously that's the most important piece, right? Flexibility and variability and variety and having the ability to do all these different various things. But you actually don't lose the game that way. The way you lose the game is if your king is taken. So the king is arguably the most important piece. And the king doesn't move real well. Okay? The queen is very versatile. She can move anywhere she wants. She can do anything she wants. It's a very powerful piece. The king, on the other hand, it doesn't move much. It only moves essentially one square at a time. But each move is very important. Each move that the king does can lose you the game. So to me, I think the king of the home gym is actually efficiency. And when I'm talking about efficiency, what I mean is, because there can be all kinds of different ways to look at efficiency. One of them could be, efficiency of space. But specifically, I think you can all boil that down to is how much value are you getting out of your inputs to then convert to your outputs? And in the context of working out, well, what kind of gains are you seeing in your strength or your hypertrophy by the inputs, the effort that you're putting in via the equipment that you have in your gym? So something that's really efficient might be something that, you get a lot of gains from using it. And I do think that, again, you could use two different items that are both trying to essentially accomplish the same task to achieve the same goal, and yet one does a very good job at helping you achieve that goal and is highly efficient, and the other one maybe not so much. I'm not saying that versatility and efficiency are necessarily completely counter to one another. You can have equipment that is both versatile and efficient. But I think when we look at that Venn diagram, I don't know that those two things overlap as much as you think they might. So I do think a lot of times the things that might be the most efficient or the most effective are not always the most versatile. Again, this allows me to circle back to the original point, which is I think that we undervalue larger items of equipment in our gym if they only have one or two functions. But we shouldn't undervalue those things if they do it in a way that nothing else in your gym can do it, and the outcome that you get from that, whether that's a lift or a piece of equipment, whatever it is, that it's of value to you. So let me give a couple examples. Recently there was a lot of buzz about the ATX standing chest press machine at Home Gym Con 2025. There's definitely a lot of people who tried it, said it was really cool, really well done. But for a lot of folks, you probably look at that and you go, well, do I need that piece of equipment? Probably for a lot of people, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I know somebody that it would make sense for. I have somebody I know that has issues with vertigo, just something where you can get dizzy quite easily. And they essentially have kind of abandoned doing flat chest presses partway because a lot of times they feel like they get some kind of vertigo type symptoms triggered when they're doing things like that. But they kind of miss doing that exercise, being able to do kind of a flat bench. So for them, that would be an avenue in which they could do something they want to do that gives them a lot of value for them in their workouts. And yeah, it would take up a decent amount of space, but it would do what it's supposed to do very effectively. It's not going to do anything else, but that one thing it's doing for you is doing very, very effectively. Another example, I think a lot of folks, I think talking about, for instance, squats. Some people don't like barbell squats, whether it's a regular barbell squat or a safety bar squat or whatever, they just don't enjoy them. So for that person, maybe a machine that allows them to do, for instance, a hack squat or a leg press, maybe it has those dual functions, that may be worth it, even though it's a big piece of equipment in their home gym. Similarly, maybe a dedicated leg press, a leg extension or leg curl is a good option for that person. Now you might say, well, yeah, but there are other options that can do that job that aren't a specific machine. And that's true. But if it has enough value to you that the machine that does that exercise is able to outperform the other options, then it's still worth it. So again, if it's just that much more efficient at accomplishing the task that you want it to accomplish, then I think it's still a reasonable option. Other examples, belt squats. Now, does everybody need a Rogue Rhino? Does everybody need the Titan Squat Max MD? Probably not. But if you're somebody who maybe has some back issues and you find that being able to do belt squats is the most important thing, well then it's worth the space to you if you feel that other options, for instance, a lever belt squat, doesn't feel as natural. You don't like that feeling of being pulled forward. So again, for that person, even though that piece of equipment may not have a lot of other great uses, and I understand that yes, you can use them for other things, but again, I think we can say that like the Rogue Rhino and the Squat Max MD, I think the thing we can probably safely say is the best thing it does is doing belt squats. That's where it really shines. The last example I have in this regard is one that's my personal example, and that's this piece of equipment right here, which is a reverse hyper or reverse hyper extension machine. So this is something to be able to do what's essentially a low back exercise, and you have a pendulum type thing here at the bottom and allows you to do hyper extensions with your lower back. Now, for a lot of folks, this would be a waste of space. It's a large piece of equipment, it's a space hog, and so I think probably for the average person, it doesn't make sense. But for me, I have a history of having some low back issues. I find this to be very valuable in improving the strength of my posterior chain. It's also something to me that has a lot of worth in regards to trying to prevent low back problems. And also when I'm having low back problems, I think it's effective in helping to rehab those issues. So this is an invaluable piece of equipment for me. And the trick is, I don't feel like any other piece of equipment does a great job of actually replicating a reverse hyper. So if you want to do a reverse hyper type exercise, you really need to have probably a reverse hyper type machine. And although they sometimes have other functions associated with them, for the most part, I think a reverse hyper is a reverse hyper is a reverse hyper. That's the main reason you're gonna have this kind of a piece of equipment. So for me, this is the best example of something where, yes, it's a large piece of equipment, and yes, it only does one thing well, but that one thing it does is something that I can't do effectively in any other way, and it's something that I find a lot of value in. So if there's something that you want to be able to do and you don't feel like you could do it well in any other way, and you're going to get a big piece of equipment that only does that one thing, or maybe does one or two things, still consider it as an addition to your home gym, because I think it's better sometimes to be efficient than it is to be versatile. Your mileage may vary. If you managed to stick with it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you did enjoy the content or found it all helpful or entertaining, please consider liking and subscribing. If there are any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. And as always, get strong, be smart, stay safe. Thanks for watching.